Spent 11 years in the NFL. I intentionally isolated myself so that I could focus on that and give that all of my attention and effort. Post NFL was like, I just needed to repair all those relationships, figure out what I'm going to do so I can be in a healthy place to where I can be present for my children, present for my family and friends, and then move forward in this world in a fulfilling way. I had to look in the mirror and say, "B. Lloyd, thank you for that. That was awesome. But I no longer need you anymore. I need to find another identity." And I love the journey, and all the individuals and all those lessons are still with me. I am just not that anymore.
Welcome to another episode of the Hey Where'd You Go podcast. I'm your host, Collin Kushner, and it's season 2. We have an awesome guest. We have former NFL wide receiver, Brandon Lloyd. Brandon, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Collin.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. I always like to start from the very beginning. I guess I'm a chronological guy. This is actually kind of a cool thing about you. What was it like growing up with 2 teachers in the household?
Growing up with 2 teachers, there was a lot of discipline, for sure. I know that, as I reflected back on my childhood, there's a lot of structure. There was a lot of accountability and responsibility. And, I think that was all part of being not only just being teachers, but my parents just raising as, Black in America. By the time I was going through the elementary school system, my parents had made wise financial decisions. And so I was able to go to school in blue ribbon schools in suburbs of Kansas City, Missouri and Blue Springs, Missouri. And being the last of 7, I'd seen and heard a lot of stories of what my family had been through. My parents were married at 18 years old in Kansas City, Missouri. They moved to California, and because my father heard that he could get his education paid for if he became a resident in the state of California, so he could go to the state school system. So that was their dream. They got married, they started their family. The first 4 kids of the 7 were born in California, and then the last 3 of us were born in Kansas City.
Growing up with that kind of a foundation that your parents set, with the accountability and all the other things that really helped, how important was it to have that foundation for your football career and just life in general?
It was incredibly important because when I was younger, I devoured the Sports Illustrateds, and I knew I wanted to be a professional athlete. I got sent to the principal's office in kindergarten because I wouldn't pick a different profession. All the other kids were picking fireman, doctor, lawyer, teacher. I was like, I'm going to be a professional athlete. My kindergarten teacher said, "That's unrealistic. If you pick it again, you're going to the principal's office." I picked it again. So, sitting in that principal's office, Mr. Barnhart, what he said to me was, "You can be a professional athlete, and you will." He proceeded to tell me the story about keeping my nose clean and getting good grades and staying out of trouble. And, so a lot of where my foundation came from individuals outside of my family unit. And I think that's what's the importance of teachers and the importance of coaches and positive role models outside of the family unit, because it gets to a certain age. You remember when you got to that age where you didn't want to hear anything from your parents anymore, probably 12, 13, 14 years old. My parents are saying the exact same thing the coach is saying, but it don't resonate. I want to hear it from the coach, right? And so once I was devouring these stories of professional athletes, I knew that was the path I wanted to go on. But I'm looking at my parents and I'm like, they can't teach me how to be a professional athlete. So I needed to find those positive influences outside of the family, but I still need to carry those foundational values that I learned in the household. And so that was always the balance, keeping one hand on my foundation, how I was raised, my ethics, my values, and then kind of wading through the waters of being a Division I college athlete. being a professional athlete and trying to have a good time while I'm doing it. So those values are very important.
How did you get introduced to football? Like when did that begin? Was it natural? Was it just like, oh, that looks cool?
Yeah, pretty much that looks cool. And my dad made me do it. I was a very rambunctious elementary school kid. I was in trouble. I was in the principal's office a lot. And so my dad gave me an ultimatum. My dad's a Golden Glove boxer. And so he's like, all right, you got one or two options. You're either going to be a boxer, you're going to play football, but you got to get this energy out some way.
That's a good ultimatum, man.
So, his knuckles are all calloused over. I'm like, man, I think I'm going to play football. So he put me in the Little League Pop Warner football league, flag football league. And that's how I started.
Once you got involved in football, the wheels start turning, you start kind of understanding the game, more and more as you got older. What was the one part of it that you really loved and it really just dialed you in?
I was gravitated towards the entertainment aspect of it. I I I caught my first kickoff in flag football, scored a touchdown. I caught the first punt the next series, scored a touchdown. And so I was sitting on the sideline. I was looking at all the reactions, and just like during the time period, it's like this is Missouri, so it's like the cowbells are ringing on the side, and the parents are cheering, and then just the attention afterwards. I was like, man, I really like this. And so it's just the entertainment aspect of it. And as I started studying the athletes, I gravitated towards Deion Sanders. And that was the way that I needed to market myself and separate myself as an athlete from the other players. So many other players, so much talent. How am I going to separate myself? And I did that with I followed the Deion Sanders model, where I was in choir, so I had a music component to myself. I played multiple sports, just like Deion Sanders. I said, all right, I'm gonna play multiple sports. I played basketball, track, and I played baseball up until my freshman year and high school. And then that's when I pivoted into track, and I played basketball and football. So I was a multi-sport athlete. And then I was really attracted to those entertainment aspects, and that's how I built myself as an athlete.
I'm just curious, you brought up choir and being involved in other activities outside of football. From your perspective, how important is it to have range and not to be just so singularly focused, but to have range and to gain perspective and values from other parts of life?
Look, I was naturally drawn to it. I was just naturally inquisitive individual, and I needed to be busy. If I'm not busy, I'll become destructive. I'm like a little chihuahua. You leave a chihuahua alone, the corners of your house are going to get chewed up. Keep it entertained. So I have to keep myself entertained, or I will chew the corners of the house. I'll ruin it. So that's just something that I knew about myself from a young age, and my parents encouraged that in me. And as far as playing multiple sports, I thought it was beneficial just for athleticism. I was wickedly athletic as a kid, just freakishly athletic, and so I just needed to put that out there and display that, just for my own ego, for the most part. But I just love the competition aspect of it. I love training. I love exercise, and so I just love to be in multiple sports, and I think that's healthy for those who are looking for alternative ways to train for the main sport. It's like active rest, where even when I was in the National Football League, in the off seasons, I would play tennis to make sure that I keep my cardio up, and I'm chasing a ball, and I'm being coached by the head pro at the country club. So it was like I'm getting all those aspects that are important to me as a football player, but I'm not playing football because I need a break from that. and tennis was something that I leaned into to keep me active.
Just so you know, this is the first time I've ever heard a professional athlete call themselves a chihuahua. But I totally understand what you're saying. Like there's so many synchronicities between the sport that you dial in, that you focus in on, and the other ones around. So it's super fascinating how you pick tennis and you found the different parts of the sport that would kind of equate over to football. At what point did you start getting attention from colleges?
I started getting attention from colleges my sophomore year. The Going into my junior year, I was a quarterback. I was following in the footsteps of my brother. My brother Mark was 4 years older than me. His junior and senior year, he was the varsity quarterback at Blue Springs High School, and I admired him. I looked up to him. You know, he was polar opposite of me. You know, he was straight laced. You know, fantastic leader, incredible communicator, the homecoming king, just incredibly popular young man in high school. And I'm like, I'm gonna follow in his footsteps, where I wanted to be quarterback, but I was definitely not as straight laced as him. I was a rebel. But I wanted to be quarterback. I entered as a freshman in quarterback. I was freshman C team quarterback, and my sophomore year, I was the varsity starting quarterback. So after my sophomore year at quarterback, the head coach calls me over to practice in the summertime. He calls my dad over from the parking lot. My dad was out in the parking lot in his lawn chair. Calls him over. Mr. Lloyd whistles him over. He comes over and he says, "Look," he says, "Brandon, the superintendent's son's moving in town. He's a quarterback. And Mr. Lloyd, I'm sure you can understand this. I want to keep my job. So I'm going to start him at quarterback." He says, "Brandon, now here's what you can do. You can back him up, or you can pick a different position." So my dad's looking at me like, "What you gonna do?" And I said, "All right, I really like Deion Sanders, so I'll play cornerback." Head coach says, "You got it." I said, "Well, Deion Sanders played both ways, so I want to be the receiver." And this is at Blue Springs, and we had a full platoon. We had so many students, athletes. We had a platoon, full offense, full defense, and so I was going to be the first two-way athlete. You got it. And I said, "All right." And I really enjoy kicking and punting. Can I still be the kicker and punter? You got it. Zach, anything else?
You're like, "I want to be the head coach."
So it's like, that was the negotiation. And so, that was it. We all shook hands, and I began that summer of going into my junior year as a cornerback and wide receiver. And as we toured around Kansas and Missouri, we went through Illinois, we played in Nebraska in these 7-on-7 tournaments on college campuses. That's when I started getting a bunch of attention. I think my first scholarship came in from Kansas State, then the University of Illinois, and then they really just started rolling in. Back then, the publications were really big, and they were that was the way to promote. And so that's when all that came in to when I was able to put that all on display. I was able to be more flashy in a skilled position than I would have been if I was only a quarterback. So that's when I started rolling my socks over my shoes so I had a spat. I put on multiple wristbands, right? And so I was like, I had different socks, and I really started separating myself and started to really become an entertainer in high school sports.
That's really interesting. I love how your coach was like, superintendent's son's moving into town. But it seemed like that you made the decision, you decided to pretty much play every position. You went both ways. When the University of Illinois offered you, I guess, why did you pick the University of Illinois? What was it that stood out to you about the university and the football program?
When I was visiting colleges, and this is 98, 99, I was going through the unofficial recruiting trips as a junior. in 98, and I mean, this was just glorious, glorious big, it was Big 8, Big 12 football. And Michael Bishop in Kansas State, Nebraska, I mean, Texas A&M, the University of Missouri. It was awesome football. Texas, it was just great football. And going through that process, my brother, who was 4 years older than me, he was actually the first one in our family to get a football scholarship. So he went Division II. He went to Missouri Southern State College in Joplin, Missouri. And so I was sitting there watching him, as an eighth grader. I was like, dang, it's like, if he can do that, I'm like, dude, I can go D1. So that was like the first time where I actually saw someone that close to me enter into the NCAA clearinghouse, taking the ACT. I was going on all the recruiting trips with him, with mom and dad and him. And I was just sitting back there, a fly on the wall, listening and watching the whole process, and imagining what it would be like for me going through that. So when it finally happened to me, what I realized is that when I took trips to the schools, the three official schools that I went to, I went on 4 official trips, but the 3 other than the University of Illinois, I was really focused on the team dynamic and how the players got along with one another. When I was going through the recruiting process, the athletic director called me in the office. He was like, University of Illinois called us. They talked about 3 of you teachers. They talked to Mr. Barnhart, your principal from elementary school. They talked to me. He's like, I'm just letting you know, this school is really interested in you. So I was like, wow, this school is doing all this background on me. They must really care. So that was the first step. The second one was the coach Greg McMahon, who was recruiting me from the University of Illinois. He would come down and watch my track practices. He would sit in the stands way, way, way up at the top and watch me high jump. And as I was preparing for the state championships, and as I was walking off, he'd stand at the top, he'd whistle down, hello. He's like, and NCAA, following NCAA rules, he wasn't going to interact with me, but he'd wave and let me know he was there. I was like, wow, they really care. So Illinois was just going above and beyond for me, staying within regulations and making me feel like I was wanted. So that was that team dynamic. The third thing was, as a person, I knew I didn't want to go below the Mason-Dixon line. I didn't want anything to do with Southern schools. It was important for me to remain focused on the education aspect. Illinois had a broadcast journalism program that was top 5 in the nation, and all the schools that I was considering all had broadcast journalism programs. When it came down to it, I was considering Northwestern, Syracuse, UCLA, University of Illinois, but when it came down to it, University of Illinois was the selection I made for that team dynamic, for the education process, and then on the official visits, those other 3 schools I went to, in some form or another, the players made racial comments. Now, on the official recruiting trips, they intentionally pair the Black athletes with the Black hosts, the Black recruits with the Black hosts, and the white recruits with the white hosts. Now, just on the surface, it's like, hey, just to reduce any conflict or possible conflict, that makes a lot of sense. And so going on these trips, in some form or another, my host would say to me, man, we don't deal with them racial slurs in reference to white people. We don't deal with them blanks like that. We don't F with them blanks like that. That's not what we do here. And so I'm sitting here like, why would I come to this school if this is the team dynamic, I don't want anything to do with it. And Illinois was the only trip that I went on where, again, same pairings, but when they went to take us out, we hung out with offensive linemen who were predominantly white. We hung out at the fraternity parties. Then they took me to a Black fraternity party on campus. And it was, Illinois had the largest Greek system in America at the time. They had every single Black fraternity and sorority, and, Jewish and other fraternities and sororities in America. So it's like I was able to do everything that related to me as an individual, and interact with all the players regardless of race at the University of Illinois. So those are, all the dynamics that came into play why I selected the University of Illinois.
I love all the intel that you took throughout the recruiting process, and really figured out what you like and what's negotiable and what's non-negotiable for you at such a young age. Your parents are both teachers. You leave early. Was there any pushback?
There was tears. There is anger. Yeah. It was, there's 6 college degrees in my family when I was in college. That was my father's wish, was that all of his children graduate high school. We had 3 options. You either get a job after high school, you can stay home for a little bit, but you got to pay rent. You go to college, or you enter into the military. One of my brothers entered into the military, into the Air Force. The rest of us went to college. There's a PhD in our family, so in our sibling group. So the goal for my father was, you get this higher education. This is what they can't take away from you. And it's not just the piece of paper, it's the discipline, it's the skills that you build along the way of getting that piece of paper that make you fully equipped to enter into the world as a Black man or a Black woman, and make something of yourself. So that was the thinking of that. And so for me, if you can imagine, this young kid from Blue Springs, Missouri, get in a Division I scholarship, that was an anomaly in its own right. But then to take it a step further and say, all right, now I'm going to go to the NFL. It's like, all right, dude, come on. You've pressed your luck. Now this much, you've got this far. Now you think you're going to go to the NFL. I can imagine it just didn't seem realistic. But I had already, like I was saying before, like my parents weren't going to teach me how to be a professional athlete. And so I had already found those outside resources to put me on that path, so that they just didn't know. I didn't share that information with them. So by the time I came to them and shared with them, hey, this is my decision, they're like, you're never going to go back. You're never going to finish. And I said, I'm going to go back. I promise. They're like, yeah, right. You're not going to do it. But the point was, my decision was made up. I had already made the decision that I was going to turn pro, and I was just informing them of what I was doing. And I, already had my agent, David Dunn, and he talked to them during the process. They had met with a couple other agents, as I was weighing my options on, and if I was going to do that. And, it ultimately was my decision, just like all my other decisions. So it was just more the way that my parents, that was their parenting style, was, when I was selecting my college, this is your decision. You make the decision. So I had to do all this research and make sure I knew what my boundaries were, what I wanted out of this experience. Because I wasn't going to be able to say this is anybody else's fault. This is all me.
It's so interesting, Brandon. I had a mentor of mine tell me, because I studied broadcast journalism as well back in college at ASU. And he told me, he said, buddy, he's from Texas. He's like, buddy, one thing you need to learn how to do in your life is make your own decisions. And he said that to me, I think I was maybe like 21 or 22. And it really resonated because as you move through your adult life, you call the shots and you make the decisions. And if you don't learn how to do it yourself, I don't really know where you end up. You kind of end up in this limbo area. So I think that's really great that your parents are like, you need to learn how to make your own decisions, even if it goes against what they wanted for you. You leave, you go to the NFL, you tell your parents, hey, mom and dad, I'm definitely going to go back and get my degree. You do that in 2018, you graduated from the University of Illinois years later. And in an article that the university wrote, I found this to be so fascinating. They quoted you saying, when I retired from the NFL, people would say, you don't need a degree. You are you. You don't need that. When you hear that now, like, what does that bring up for you? And what advice would you give to other, student athletes in that position?
It brings a tear to my eye, just because of you know, the accountability aspect. That's what I promised my parents when I was 18 years old, was that I was going to get that degree. And my dad was right. All of the skills that I built along the way of holding myself accountable and getting that degree, it was so rewarding. It was rewarding, one, going back with all this like life experience as a 34-year-old student, going back, and I had to take some one-on-one classes again. I had to take anthropology 101. I had to retake Spanish. I took 3 levels of Spanish. And I had to take biology 101, right? And so just going in there with a mature mindset, and it just made me such a better student. And I was so much more equipped to critically think, to comprehend the concepts. I was a way better reader. I was able to communicate and write and formulate my thoughts, and it was just it's such a fantastic experience and rewarding experience to go back into academia. And so I think that as a young person, if anybody is in this situation where they can go, regardless if they're an athlete or not, if someone's putting $1 million in your face and saying, come earn it, go do that. Right? If someone's, if there's a job opportunity or a situation where someone's offering you an opportunity to go make money in the real world, leave school and go do that. Why? Because you can always go back later. You can always go back. And when you go back, you're going to be so much more valuable to the education system, in the classroom, and the information is going to be so much more pertinent to you. It was so much more usable when I was taking political science, in 2016 during the elections, and understand the difference between the parliamentary system and the presidential system, and just applying this information in real time. It was just such a great experience. So much so that at the onset of the pandemic, I enrolled into an MBA program. And it just took it to a whole nother next level. And I just feel like everyone should go get an MBA.
The best part about this, Brandon, is just seeing the excitement, in your eyes and your face from, kind of this journey that you've taken so far. And you're so right. I always joked around with friends. I'm like, I'd love to go back to school because of all the knowledge now. I feel like I'd be a much better student. I'd be more focused. I'd be more dialed in, because back when you're 19, 20 years old, why am I taking philosophy 101? I don't need this. And you maybe just, and I'm not saying this is a blanket statement for all, but you kind of you get by. Like, that was my mentality in classes that had nothing to do with being a television anchor. And looking back, I'm like, you know what? It would be cool to go back to school. You get to learn more and you get to take all that knowledge. Brandon, you were drafted by the San Francisco 49ers in the 4th round back in 2003. You spent 11 seasons in the National Football League. When you got the call from the 49ers, what was that moment like for you, given the fact that this was your dream that goes all the way back to childhood when you were getting sent to the principal's office for not picking something else.
Yes, it was definitely fulfilling in the sense that the opportunity was materializing. But in reality, it was very upsetting because I was projected to go a lot higher. So I was projected to go in the first 3 rounds, second or third round. And I ended up dropping into the second day into the 4th round. And in reality, the only person happy in the NFL draft is the first overall pick. Everyone else thinks they should have been drafted higher. And I'm no exception. I wasn't saying I was thinking I was going to be number 1, but I was hoping that I was going to be a lot higher. And that's just more for, that initial financial reward that comes with being drafted higher. But in reality, once I got to the team, it didn't matter. I had a chip on my shoulder. And I tend to lean more towards the later round draft picks because of that. I had to earn it. I got on that team. I need to earn it. I need to earn my place. I needed to prove that I belong. I need to play special teams. I need to play in the preseason. It really put all that I was building from little leagues to high school to the test. Like all that separating myself, that didn't mean anything when it came to getting on that roster for that first time. It was just all about the effort and what I can put into it.
In 2010, you're with the Denver Broncos. You led the entire NFL in receiving yards with nearly 1,500 yards, 11 receiving touchdowns. And Brandon, you're on a team that was 4-12, finished last in the AFC West, and your 2 quarterbacks were Kyle Orton and Tim Tebow. Given the years that you had before, like, why was that season like so successful? Like, what was it like, mind, body, and soul, that just elevated your game to that level?
Yeah, that 2010 season was what I call the point where effort and opportunity meet. I've always considered myself a high effort individual, and all I really needed was an opportunity to be put on that platform, given that platform to showcase my talent. And playing with Kyle Orton in Chicago in 2008, when he was transferred to the Broncos and the Jay Cutler swap. That year I actually thought I was done playing in the NFL. I had tore my PCL with the Chicago Bears. I was gathering my transcripts from the University of Illinois. I was already in Illinois, so I was just going to stay in Lake Forest and finish my undergraduate. I was lining up a role at the Big Ten Network. And the Big Ten Network was like, hold on. We don't know. Like, how about give us a call in August? And we'll circle around in August and we'll see if this really is going to materialize. We don't want to start creating material around you and then you turn around and go back to the NFL. I'm like, I promise, I'm done. They're like, no. And, it was the off-season drug on. And my sports agent actually called me and was like, hey, I think this is it for you. No teams are calling. And I was like, all right. So I was actually moving on in 2008. And Kyle Orton called me in July. And it's like, hey, man, I'm not really that happy with what's going on with the receivers out here. What kind of shape you in? And I'm like, I'm doing some Olympic lifting with my dentist. He's a big Russian Jewish guy. He's an amateur triathlete, big old legs, big old trunk, and this huge guy. I'm like, so I'm powerlifting with him. I'm playing basketball with the hip hop community on the South Side in the country club out there. I'm rock climbing with my neighbors in Lake Forest here, indoor rock climbing puzzle. And these people are all chefs, so we're like eating charcuterie plates and drinking wine while we're doing these rock climbing puzzles. So I'm in this I'm like, man, I'm all right. I'm in good shape. So Josh McDaniels calls and is like, hey, man, do you remember I ran your pro day at Illinois with the New England Patriots? I was like, I don't remember. He's like, yeah. He's like, I wanted to draft you, but Bill just didn't want to draft you. He's like, you just didn't fit. And he says, man, if you can come out here and play anything remotely like you were playing at that time point, he's like, you'll be all pro. And so I flew out for a workout, lit it up. They brought me on. I didn't play at all in that 2009 season when I was with the Broncos the first year. And the players stayed remarkably healthy. None of the receivers got injured. And it wasn't until the end of the season when two of the receivers faked injuries to where I got put in for the last two games of the 2009 season. I played really well in those last two games. Brandon Marshall was traded away. They didn't bring back Stokely. And then I was put into the starting receiver role in 2010. And that was the first time where I had an offensive coordinator say to me, hey, man, I'm going to feature you. We're going to throw you the ball. And then they turn around and do it. And it was just it was the cerebral type of offense that I've always wanted to play. 3-4 passing options per play, hand signals. I was incorporated into the game planning. There was routes specifically for double, triple moves. Big posts and go routes and fades. And Kyle Orton can throw all the different types of balls. He was a pure just gunslinger. He wanted to throw the ball. He'd be on the side. He was on the sideline one time. He's like, man, I don't feel comfortable if I don't throw 3 or 4 interceptions in a game. It's like I'm not even trying, right? It's like he just wanted to throw the ball. So we got in these games, we're throwing 50 times a game. And yeah, being on a team with only 4 wins, it was tough to celebrate. It was tough to really be excited for what was happening, because I saw it happening, the entire season, because the media would come up to me and was kind of like, hey, man, it's the 4th game of the season. You've already got half as many yards as your biggest season in the NFL. And it's kind of like, uh, 6 games into the season, man, you got more yards than you've ever had in your entire career in one season. So it's like, these things were happening, but the team wasn't performing so well, so it just made it tough to celebrate. But just in my circles with the sports agent, with my family and my friends who are really celebrating the opportunity to really put my talent on that platform and then be up there with the elite receivers. So it was just it was rewarding. It was humbling to be able to compete up there and show that statistically I'm the best. And I've always been this good. I just needed an opportunity, so it was good. It was just really thankful for Kyle for choosing to throw the ball to me, and Josh McDaniels for running plays and calling my number.
I love the mantra that you had for that effort and opportunity, because you got to give your max effort, but it does come down to opportunity. I mean, there are probably thousands of athletes where the effort's there, the skill's there, everything's there, but the opportunity never comes to showcase it. And that's the key piece. Because I think, at least for me growing up as a hockey player, there's a lot of frustration because the effort was always there, but the opportunity mostly never really arrived. And I remember, it's kind of powerful what you're saying right now, because that's kind of what my dad would tell me, and my coach would be like, hey, you got to get the opportunity. And if the opportunity doesn't come, just remember that it's not a reflection on who you are and the work that you've put in. But that's a tough pill to swallow, and it takes a long time to separate the two.
Yeah, but you have to remember, Josh McDaniels brought George Karl in to speak to us in the 2008 and the 2009 season. And that was one of his big frustrations, was the players that he had on the team at the time, Carmelo Anthony and J.R. Smith, and what he was dealing with Allen Iverson prior to that, was that effort was a switch for them. They would turn it on and off, and it's not a switch. Effort is like an athletic ability. It's always on and always on display. And I remember hearing that. I was like, wow, like that really resonated with me. That exactly was what my coaches, when I was in high school, that's what they said to me. Like, Brandon, you got to redirect your energy. You got to redirect your energy. I had all this pent up energy, and I didn't know the plays, and I couldn't remember the plays, and I was getting mad and I was getting frustrated. And like, redirect your energy. Once you learn your plays, you start studying X's and O's, then that's when the fun happens. And so it's just like, that effort was a switch for me when I was in high school. It was like, all right, now effort never turns off. All I'm waiting for is opportunities. And that's just a valuable lesson.
That's powerful, man. That the effort switch always stays on, and then all you're doing is just hunting down that opportunity. I love that. I guess to kind of wrap things up, dude. A couple years later, you retired from the National Football League, and I kind of want to understand the psyche behind that, because I know sometimes it just happens. Sometimes it's maybe a little bit forced. Why did you retire from the NFL?
Yeah, I always tell people old age. They laugh that, right?
They're like 32
Like,
isn't
come
old,
on,
or however
come
old you
on.
are.
It's old in that industry, right? And it just reached a point for me where I didn't have the energy to go into another organization and pretend like there's a competition. I know I'm better. I know I'm the best. I don't want to pretend I don't want to go in an organization and pretend like I shouldn't be getting more targets. Um, when in reality, what it is that I'd be making too much money, and they'd prefer to have two or three rookies doing, you know, playing for the value of my contract when they would play special teams. They'd run through a brick wall. They'd do anything for the organization. When I wouldn't. I'm just a specialty outside wide receiver, right? That's just difficult to to quantify that on the balance sheet of a football organization. And so, the old age factors in. I think I was also just ready to move on. You know, it happened. There's always just this balance where it's like I still have a lot left in the tank. That's what we all feel like when we're retiring. It's like, I still got a lot left in the tank. But at the same time, a large part of me was like, man, it's time to move on. I need to, my last 5 years in the NFL, I had been working in aerospace sales. So I already had foresight that the end was near. And I'd been preparing myself to enter into the corporate world by accepting a role in aerospace sales. And so, I already had an account. I was working the accounts with SpaceX and Boeing. That I was working the F-35 project with subcontractors in Southern California. I was studying under a metallurgist in the off season. And so I had this like incredible opportunity where I was really developing myself as a businessman. And so the decision wasn't as hard for me. Ego wise, it was very hard. It was a loss of life. It was loss of identity. And like Marcellus Wallace says in Pulp Fiction, that's just your ego fucking with you, right? That's not reality. So I needed to detach myself from that identity as a football player. And that was just with a lot of self-help books, Eckhart Tolle, talk therapy, that was hypnotherapy. I sit with the shaman. It's just like a lot of work with my advisors, my mentors, with my sponsors. So it's just like really figuring out what I want to do with myself, putting that plan together on what it looks like for me, repairing my relationships with my children, with my siblings. Spending 11 years in the NFL, I isolated myself. I intentionally isolated myself so that I could focus on that and give that all of my attention and effort. And so just like post NFL was like, I just needed to repair all those relationships, figure out what I'm going to do so I'm not chewing up the the corners of the wall. And so I can be in a healthy place to where I can be present for my children, present for my family and friends, and then move forward in this world in a fulfilling way that's fulfilling for me.
I love how you move through that. I mean, you're mourning a part of yourself. It takes. I mean, it's a part of you has moved on, and you need to take the time and attention to mourn it, because I think that's the space for many athletes where it becomes that area where you either sink or swim, and it becomes kind of gray area, but I think that's so wise and smart of you to take the opportunity to dive into books, dive into therapy, dive into some spirituality to kind of get that all dialed in. That's powerful, man.
Yeah, it was like, I had to look in the mirror and say, "B. Lloyd, thank you for that. That was awesome. That was a hell of a ride. Thank you for all that came along with that. But I no longer need you anymore. I need to find another identity. I need to be Brandon Lloyd moving forward." And so all that was great. And I love the journey, and all the individuals and all those lessons are still with me. They're just not, I am just not that anymore.
Brandon Lloyd, I appreciate the time, man. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour.
Well, you have to come on again. I'll totally come on again. We can talk. We can talk corporate life and navigating that. That would be fun.